everybody. Welcome once again to another episode of The X Factor, and thrilled to be joined today by Jessica Hamilton, who is a proven private equity-backed CFO slash COO and overall transformation catalyst in the mid-market. So Jessica, welcome. So happy to have you here today.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Okay, great. Give us a quick snapshot of your background, if you would, to set the context, and then we'll dig in.
Sure. So pretty classically trained coming out of college, went the accounting route, ended up in public accounting for 6-7 years, then decided to jump into industry and have been in the software scene ever since, primarily out of the Austin, Texas area. Started out more earlier stage startups, VC backed, and over the last 15 years, I've kind of worked my way up the funnel, if you will, to more kind of PE backed companies now, currently with LeaseCrunch, backed by Aquiline Capital Partners.
Okay, terrific. And so there's a lot that Jessica and I could talk about today, including what it's like to be married to a spouse who's also a CFO. But what we're going to focus on is how CXOs in general, through the lens of a CFO, can do their part to help drive transformation. So for those in the audience, you've heard that term a lot. Just to translate, what it really means for the private equity firms that invest in your businesses, they want radical and speedy transformation of your organization such that it has become so professionalized, so scaled, the total addressable market has been, revolutionized and expanded to where 5 years later, that business is coming close to being an unrecognizable version of itself. Still entrepreneurial, it still holds on to its secret sauce, but that transformation has to happen from the front line of the executive team, and Jessica's made a career of doing that very thing. So excited to kind of talk about that. So before we jump in, your quick observations of the differences between VC and private equity, and what kind of led you to take the private equity fork in the road?
Sure. Yeah, it's actually becoming a little less clear over the last decade. The lines are very much blurring. So I initially wanted to join earlier stage entities with VC backed. I had heard and learned from my colleagues that there's a lot more flexibility in the way that you build your team and processes and not so much red tape. And then as I've progressed over the last 15 years, I really found out that it's not black or white. You really have to know the sponsor to understand, do they have a playbook? Are they going to be very, very prescriptive? Or are they going to let you have some more freedom to choose the processes and playbooks that maybe you yourself want to deploy? So for me, it's been fun going up towards private equity to see. I'm not a big fan of playbook and prescriptive playbooks, if you will, but I have learned that just because it's a large name PE doesn't mean that they're going to have a set rules for you to follow and processes for you to follow. So for me, it's been about finding the right firm, understanding their processes and where they are and what they require of their portfolio companies, and just deciding if it's a good fit for me. I like somewhere in the middle where there's some structure, there's some ideas of best practices, but you still have the freedom to select things yourself.
And for our audience out there, wherever you live in that ecosystem of the type of CXO that you are, there's a private equity firm that can be custom built for you, and just as many who would be a bit of a nightmarish fit, who subscribe to different philosophies. So always reminding folks to be mindful to vet the sponsor fit, not just the executive and cultural fit. Okay, great. So when we talk about strategic change agent transformation, at least in my experience, it usually starts with what I'll call the professionalization of a business. A lot of these founder-led or earlier stage companies that have first-time private equity money or even second-time private equity money are still maturing as businesses. And it's funny when we talk to some of the existing executives that there can be some pushback, like, what do you mean we're professional? So it exists on a continuum, but we always want to advance that ball. So when you think about professionalizing a business is kind of the first step, how do you go about assessing the landscape to figure out where you're going to start contributing?
Yeah, great question. You have to listen. I actually have a poster here in my home office that says you must listen to really be heard. And I've learned the hard way to not come in and make any sort of assumptions. There's a reason why this company, the founders, the leadership put things in place. Normally it's because of lack of resources, but not all the time. It could have been a strategic reason that a decision was made. And in order to really change it, you have to understand it first. So for me, coming into any new opportunity, the first 90 days, you're listening. You're listening to how folks are doing their job. What are their pain points? I like to meet with leaders of all departments within the organization to say, tell me what you're most frustrated by. It doesn't necessarily even have to do with accounting and HR or legal, the areas that I own in the business, just in general here at this company, tell me what are some of the most frustrating processes that you're a part of. From there, you can really start to understand how did we get to the spot that we're in. And then you can start building your roadmap of all the things that you want to change. Before you come in, you typically have already had a conversation with the sponsor on the things that maybe they found in due diligence that they want changed. You kind of know directionally all the changes you're going to make along the way. You're going to be really tempted to just start them all initially, but that's too overwhelming for the team, especially if the team members have not been through this type of transformation before. So my advice is to listen and to really understand how did we get to where we are, and then find out if you can find a partner that can help you be the change agent that you were brought in to be. So for example, for me at LeaseCrunch, I quickly realized I needed a controller that needed to have been through transformation and changes before to join me in my journey at LeaseCrunch. And he started a few weeks ago, and together we can build that roadmap of what exactly are we going to change and when, and how do we want to message that to the team. Let's set proper expectations so folks aren't really overwhelmed. But for the first 90 days, just make sure you listen and understand from all the parties involved on how did we get to where we are and what are the challenges the team's currently facing.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned not wanting to overwhelm the team. And we also know that most human beings don't go out of their way to seek out change, creatures of habit. So, what's the leadership and messaging piece after you've kind of gotten a baseline and you're preparing folks for that journey, knowing that they themselves will have to experience change in their own rights?
I've been really lucky to join organizations that have core values with foundations in transparency. I'm a very transparent person, very blunt. Recently, our CEO made us do the Myers-Briggs test, and I'm an ESTJA. And so very, very blunt person. And so what I have found is to share the plan. Yes, changes are coming. However, they're not going to be all overnight. We want everyone to come along with us. Having one-on-ones to understand for each person on the team, are you interested in learning more about the changes that we're making and kind of being an integral part of them? Or would you rather keep doing your day-to-day job and us kind of keep you posted along the way on the changes that are coming and how it may or may not affect your position? But just really transparent and bringing folks along on, yes, changes are coming. It's okay. Being really clear about job security. So if you know that there are going to be some changes that you're making that may have folks fearful of their job, getting in front of that early to say, hey, your job may be changing, but it's not going to be going away. So yes, we're going to automate some parts of your position, but hey, there's all these other things that I need help with that I'm also going to be changing. So therefore you can have some security that your job is protected. So for me, it's been really important just to be transparent with the team along the way so that they know change is coming and it's not something to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm. And some of that transparency can include some potentially awkward or difficult conversations around, we are creating a new position here. We are going to elevate this role. Person X, we're going to try to find another home for you in the company because, we're going to take this group in a slightly different direction. And I suppose that's all about transparency and compassion blended into one approach.
Absolutely. And I would also note that starting off with the expectation of the sponsor, because when you're an earlier stage company, you're bootstrap, maybe you have angel funding, not everyone at the company understands what is the expectation of the sponsor. So for me coming in to say, hey guys, with our new sponsor at LeaseCrunch, for example, here are the things that they expect of us. Here's our time horizon. And we have a responsibility to that investor to make sure that they get a return on their investment. And so as a result, here are the things we're going to be marching to over the next 3, 4, 5 years, so that they understand we're not just making these changes on a whim. They're all strategic based on our new owners, if you will. And absolutely, those conversations can become very awkward, but it is important to say, hey, we want to align your long-term career trajectory with our trajectory, and those may not be aligned. You joined a small bootstrap business, and that's not what we are anymore. And so we will help you, give you time to go find another bootstrap business if that is more aligned with where you want to go. Or if you'd like to learn how this world of PE-sponsored companies works and all the way to an exit transaction, this is a great place to learn those things. It's going to be bumpy, and it's going to be thrilling and frustrating, and sometimes all of those things at the exact same time. But this will be a great place for you to learn. Having those conversations up front and kind of knowing who's going to be here, who's not. Is there another spot in the organization, or is it a conversation about kind of amicably coaching someone out? Those all absolutely have to happen.
Boy, great segue, which leads into what was going to be my next question, which is part of being a strategic change agent, whether you're the first time private equity money in a deal or even in a secondary buyout. Whoever the private equity firm is looking to level up the rigor of the business, whether it's establishing rigor or strengthening it. And it sounds like you're having that journey conversation up front and explaining in your best guess how that individual may or may not be suited to go down that path and what their options are. Seems like you have a way of taking some perceived difficult conversations and making them a little bit more accessible to folks.
Absolutely, especially when there's so much change to be had. Sometimes you come in an organization, maybe there's not as many large projects that you have to take on, but for me, it hasn't been the case. There's been multiple projects, multi-year projects that can be tackled, and finding folks in the team that understand the business, understand our customers, our employees, our vendors, our partners, they're the best resources to help you get to the next level. So if you can find folks who are already in the business, who have that curiosity and that desire to keep learning more, especially when it comes to business systems. I mean, if you're not thinking about business systems, especially as a software company, you're just going to be dead in the water. So what I'm finding is a lot of folks are very curious about business systems and how they can integrate and work together. And those are the folks that are great partners as you're building scalable processes and automating things internally, that they can come along for the journey. May not be the most experienced people, but you don't always need the most experienced. You need an appetite for curiosity and drive to get it done.
Yeah, no question. So let's fast forward a little bit. You're a year or two into the journey and you're continuing to cultivate what I'll call a culture of excellence and then also accountability. So I think it's one of those dichotomies where on one hand, you want to help people be their best selves and support them and guide them and give them opportunity. But the buck's got to stop with each individual for whatever they're responsible and accountable to their colleagues for. So any insight into how you've developed that culture of excellence and accountability along the way?
Absolutely. It varies by organization, definitely. For me, I am an OKR person. I set goals for myself and my team, and I expect it to trickle down on my teams on a quarterly basis. We're going to share that with the company. We're going to hold ourselves accountable to it. And if you come into an organization where that hasn't always been the case, once again, it's a lot about transparency and communication. Hey, why are we setting up these OKRs? How do they relate to the overall strategies of the business and that 5-year goal that we might have with our new key sponsor? And once again, letting folks know the expectation. Is it black and white? If I don't get all my goals done, do I no longer have a job here? Of course not. There's always going to be extenuating circumstances that'll make us fall behind on our goals. We may change our mind mid-quarter on our goals, and that is okay. But the point is to have clear expectations every step of the way to make sure that we're working on the things we need to be working on to make improvements every 90 days. And so I learned the hard way that doing this kind of slow and steady is the best. So maybe first asking folks, hey, write down what you think your goals are for this month, for this quarter, and send them to me. Let me take a look. And you'll find that even though folks may not have ever written them down before, they've got goals. They know what they need to be working on. They know it needs improvement. And so if you kind of ask folks to submit it to you when there's no formal structure in place, you'll be surprised with how aligned you probably are out the gate. And then you can get down more of a formal habit, whether it's using software to track goals or even just tracking it in a G Sheet or a Monday.com board or whatnot. That becomes a muscle that folks then get used to flexing. And there's actually now an excitement about going into the place and marking that goal is done. Everyone likes to finish tasks and feel accomplished. And so getting that muscle and teaching folks how to flex it and to understand it's okay if you fall behind. It's okay if we change our mind. But the goal is to be transparent, open, and to hold ourselves accountable. We want to do what we say we're going to do.
Mm-hmm. No question. So you mentioned processes and systems earlier. What's the right approach or an approach that's worked for you to get the right balance of processes and systems so people are protected by repeatable standards that they can rely on, but maybe falling short of them feeling suffocated by being a cog in a wheel? What's that look like for you?
Yes, you kind of hit it earlier when you said, the executives find a PE that fits you. And
Mhm.
for me, I very much enjoy earlier stage companies where I can put rigor in place, but not so much red tape that people just cannot stand coming to work every day. Like I use kind of just to keep it really simple, like processing a check. Sending out a check or a payment shouldn't be 15 clicks in 3 different systems. It should be really easy for whoever's job that is to get that bill paid and have as little red tape as possible. So for me personally, I like to come into organizations with sponsors who expect a reasonable balance. So once you come in thinking, okay, I'm not going to boil the ocean. I don't have to have the absolute best financial controls in place. I'm not a publicly traded organization. I want to do just enough to be safe and to protect our assets and our investments, but I also want to have folks enjoy their job. So as part of that first 90-day assessment, it's really looking to see where do I really have problems? Where is there true risk for the organization, whether it's data, personal information, problems with team members. Assess first where are the high risk areas and try to fix those first just to protect the organization. In the event you do not have any really high risk areas, then it's really looking at all of the different processes and systems, quite frankly, that you can put in place to say, what is the highest and best use? What is going to make everyone's day jobs better? What's going to increase the culture perhaps at the organization or cut down on expenses if we're using a lot of external vendors, for example, to do things when we can purchase a system, get it implemented in 60 days and be done with that third-party expense. So just really looking holistically at all the opportunities as it compares to the risk that each of those opportunities addresses, and then put them in your roadmap and decide, what am I going to do? So for example, at LeaseCrunch, it was very clear to me, we needed to make a change on human resources. The way that we were processing payroll and our benefits and the benefit offerings that we had were not up to par for our software company in the United States. And so for me, I made that one of my first objectives was to select a PEO and select benefit offerings that would be more competitive for the organization and also just give our employees better access to resources across the board. And so that was one of the first things I tackled at LeaseCrunch, but that's not always the case. It may be a different area of the business that's risky or that you see a lot of improvement areas for, and you might want to tackle that first.
Yep, terrific. So that's kind of the foundational approach of making sure your group is squared away and contributing what it's supposed to. But then your job as CFO, of course, is to tie into the broader company strategy of transformation and how we're going to make this an amazingly valuable company, even more so than it is today. So before we get into a couple of those questions, what advice do you have for people other than the CEO, be it CFO, head of commercial, or whatever, to engage beyond the scope of their functional lane so that you're not just seen as the CFO, you're actually a partner in transformation and platform strategy? What's worked for you in that regard?
to be completely transparent and intellectually curious every step of the way. The notion of that's not my job or that's not my area, I just never subscribed to that. So from the very first startup I joined in Austin, Texas back in 2010, I would ask the CTO questions about the organization. I would ask the head of sales, well, why are you putting quotas like this and commissions like this? I don't understand. Help me learn. And so every step of the way, I wanted to understand why the leaders in the organization made the decisions that they made. And then that led me to have the experience and the knowledge to then be an advisor to folks. So then with the next startup I joined, maybe it's a first-time sales leader, I can bring my experiences that I've learned from working with other sales leaders to the table. And so as you broaden your own curiosity and understanding of just how businesses work, you find yourself over time becoming the trusted advisor, becoming a good partner to the entire leadership team, not just the CEO, to say, hey, I'm thinking about making this change. What do you think? And then you can help with ideation and figuring out the best course of action. And I've really enjoyed that so much. And as a result, at my last company, I actually was asked to become COO. And that even furthered my ability to learn about our sales process and client success and support and information technology, as well as privacy security. And I find a lot of joy in that. I don't like to stay in my lane. I like to have a role where I have much broader skill set and expectations and responsibilities. And that worked out really well for me. And it all started with asking the questions, not shy, and not staying in my lane from my very first opportunity at a startup.
Well, there's a lot there to unpack in another conversation, but certainly in order to pull off that approach, you've got to have vulnerability and be comfortable asking these questions, because you can't be intellectually curious without exposing to the world what you don't know. And I think too many executives would rather folks assume that they don't need that question answered, but all that does is stymie learning. And it sounds to me like you immerse yourself in the business through curiosity and vulnerability. You begin to slowly but surely understand how all the gears and pistons work in the machinery of the company, where we grow, why we lose money, why we make money. And then you can start really unleashing your financial toolkit in that broader context to make change.
Exactly. The connecting of the dots, because that's what's so cool about the CFO role and partnering with really strong, especially financial minded CEOs, is it really is the connection. So understanding what is happening in sales or client success, and then how does that kind of come down to our KPIs and ultimately our business valuation, how does support impact that, even our own people operations processes and our accounting processes. It all touches some sort of piece of the life cycle of our customer. And so being able to connect all those dots for the entire organization to understand the decisions we make over there in R&D or in tech absolutely impact what's going to happen in support. And making sure that we're tracking all those KPIs, whether they're leading indicators or lagging indicators, customer health, or just simply our company's health. Connecting all the dots with our people internally to understand the impact has been really critical. And then it makes a lot for much more curious conversation. When employees start to understand how everything works together, they're asking good questions. They're bringing up good feedback or observations on, hey, this decision we're about to make, have we thought about this, this, and this? And that's what makes it really fun.
Yep, no question. So when you hear private equity talk about what they invest in, we're all familiar with the term portfolio companies, but you'll also hear them referred to as platform companies, and those terms are kind of interchangeable. But do some translating for our audience here. What does it mean to platformize a business?
So I think of it in two ways. And one of them for me, which I'm laser focused on right now, is building a true kind of platform internally for LeaseCrunch. We absolutely will engage in inorganic growth opportunities. And I keep telling the team, it's our job to be prepared. We need to be prepared to plug in that company that we may acquire into our platform. And that means into our HR processes, our accounting processes, our IT process, product process, across the board. I keep using the catcher's mitt. We got to be ready to catch it. catch it and bring it in so that we can hopefully get to integration as quickly as possible. And so every decision that we're making along the way is not only to support current state, but what is that future state 12 months from now, 24 months from now, 5 years from now, to make sure that the platform that we're building internally is prepared for that. So that's one thing that I'm very passionate about. It's one thing I bring into the company to get us ready, if you will, to catch that first acquisition. But also when I think about platforming a company for us specifically is really also thinking about the software that we do sell and how are we going to take that and expand it and become the platform. LeaseCrunch services CPA firms here in the United States currently, hopefully international soon. But we're really thinking about the platform to service our customers. How can we be a one-stop shop for them to come into the platform to service everything they may need as a CPA firm to make their jobs, their clients happier, their employees happier. And so we also think about platforming from that perspective for the actual software that we develop ourselves or may acquire, and how can that become a platform for our customers. So it's important to know what is, especially for a PE world, for us, it's both. We're focused on making an internal platform to be able to plug in acquisitions and to really scale our business. But we're also talking about our M&A strategy to build that platform for our customers. It's important to know what your PE is talking about when they talk about building that platform.
Love it. And let me just clarify for our audience that, yes, Jessica's doing all this in a tech company, but these principles apply just as critically to manufacturing, services, and any other type of business. Because even if your platform company isn't going to do any acquisitions, let's pretend it's a full-on organic growth story. You might do one that you're surprised to do. And even if you don't, all the things that you would do to platformize yourself lend themselves to scale and repeatability. So that's a beautiful thing. And then platformizing your product, whether you're a software solution or a collection of services, gives you ideas on how to execute on your add-on strategy. What do you want to make versus buy? How are you going to expand that total addressable market? So I've learned something just now, because I've always thought of platforming in the internal context, but I love the concept of thinking about it externally as well from a go-to-market standpoint.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. So when we think about growth, because even though you're a CFO, you're very mindful of how you can contribute to, the company's continued expansion. Is there a quick example of, when you've gone through the platformizing exercise yourself, that you've been able to bring some additional value add to a commercial strategy?
Absolutely. So especially in the world of SaaS, there are a lot of different solutions out there in the form of billing solutions that can help you get your invoices out to customers very quickly with a lot of transparency, get paid quickly. And one of the examples that I tend to have taken to more than one company is price increases. As a sales team, as client success, oh, no one wants to go to a customer with a price increase. No one wants to go, approach that. But it really has become customary, especially in this world of inflation that we've been in for the last few years. And so using technology to help get the price increase messages out to our customers, having it really easily added to invoices, having it really easily a way for customers to come back if they do want to speak to their customer success manager or account manager about that, has been wonderful. And so over the last, call it 6 years, we've had very little pushback on price increases by taking more of a scalable approach to it and not asking our CSMs and our account managers to go out and have individual conversations with each person. You also can be really smart about making sure you're adding that into your terms of service or your master service agreements that, of course, we all know price increases typically are addressed in those situations. And so few companies actually do it. You have it in a contract, you have the contractual right to do it. Everyone else is doing it, but for some reason you're scared to do it. And we, having done this in the past, that is a nice way to uptick ARR for a SaaS business or revenue growth for a SaaS business. So that is one example, as well as some different strategies to deploy around renewal time to make sure that you really understand your churn metrics. What are some of those leading indicators, especially if you're a usage-based SaaS business to kind of get in front of predicted churn to say, hey, what are some of the things we see early on behavioral wise from our customers that will help us be able to predict and ideally mitigate churn quicker. And so once again, there's tons of great SaaS tools out there in the SaaS ecosystem of ways to kind of help keep customer score and health and usage trends. And that's been critical for the last few businesses I've been at to deploy those tools and to keep a good eye on what's happening with your customers in advance.
Well, whatever functional discipline you're in out there, I encourage you to have command of metrics outside of your functional discipline, the way that Jessica has as a CFO, a command of commercial metrics. Clearly, you spend a lot of time thinking about how to improve the top line growth of this business as CFO, which is awesome. So I guess last area to touch on here with regard to executing the strategy is M&A. So we know that not every deal thesis is going to involve add-ons, but many do. So we've already platformized the company to where it's prepared to receive an add-on acquisition. But beyond that, what are some of your best practices for integrating these add-ons, and maybe an example or two of what's gone well, or either something that hasn't gone well or disaster averted, thanks to some good measures?
Yeah, definitely. Back to that spirit of transparency. I've learned more on what not to do than what to do at this point in my personal career. But I will absolutely share this with anyone, and for anyone who might want to reach out to me after this to talk more. Integrating as quickly as possible is key. And that is across the board. Your people, culture, processes, your product, your tech stack, all of it. If you kick the can and keep kicking the can, you're going to look up 2-3 years from now and you're going to realize you've never integrated. And now it's time for you to go have that next exit. And you're selling a Band-Aid hodgepodge of products or people. And so I've learned that to have an integration plan. It needs to be someone's job. It cannot be a collective effort, decision by committee. There needs to be one person that owns the integration of your add-on. Now, of course, they might have a team that they can't do it all themselves, but there needs to be one person who's waking up every day thinking about this add-on and what are we going to integrate and when. And if we're not going to integrate, making sure everyone understands the repercussions of that and the why. Because folks don't stick around forever, average tenure, I think, at software companies, it's in the Austin area, is like 3 to 6 years. And so you have to also document why these decisions were made so that then you can pass on that knowledge. And so during due diligence, ask as many questions as possible. Invest in the various types of diligence, the IT diligence, the people ops diligence, so you can get all those reports at the beginning so that you know what some of those holes may be, and have a thesis well before the deal is inked on what is that integration roadmap going to be, and communicate to the team, hey, people ops is going to be integrated in 30 days, accounting in 90 days, the tech stack might take 120 days, but layer out that expectation so that everyone at the company knows above my day job of taking care of our customers, taking care of our vendors, taking care of our employees, I also have a responsibility to help with this integration. And so that needs to be part of my OKRs. That needs to be part of my daily stand-up with my team. So everyone understands we do have this additional project. I think folks tend to think, oh, it's an acquisition. Someone else is going to be working on the integration part. I'll do it when I can get to it. And absolutely not. It needs to be some of your top goals while you're doing it straight out the gate. Otherwise, you're back to that kicking the can and having those regrets of not having just done it in my opinion, no later than year one.
Well, urgency is always advisable in any private equity-backed situation, but maybe nowhere more critical than with the integration effort. And to your point, when you go to sell a business, if it's a patchwork quilt, the multiple valuation is going to suffer. That's tied directly to your equity grant and its wealth creation capacity. So it's in everyone's best interest to get that done.
It is. Bob, I want to add one more on that topic. That
Please.
I learned the hard way, and definitely taking this learning with me over here to LeaseCrunch. I think there's a preconceived notion sometimes that I'm the acquirer, I'm the bigger entity. I maybe have more revenue, more employees, I've been around longer. So therefore, the acquired company is going to be integrated into my way. And what I have found is that that is such a short view of the world, and that you really should take the time. This is why this is so, it's smart to do it in the due diligence cycle of the deal phase, is to look at what the acquiring company is using. Their technology, their people, their processes may be better for the newly combined organization. And so just don't assume that they need to get plugged into you. I would really take the time to look at the entire stack of both organizations and decide, is there something that we should adopt holistically from the new entity over? Because it's a missed opportunity, and it's sometimes can be just as easy to plug yourself into something they already have in place than the other way around. So I would just highly encourage everyone, especially if you're going through your first acquisition, to make sure you're looking at both sides of the table there.
Yeah, and I would guess that it makes practical sense too from a cultural integration. If you're the acquired entity and 100% of the way you do business now has to conform to the platform, even though you know in your heart that maybe 15% of practices were actually better than they are. So when you're thoughtful about it, not only are you ending with a better net result and approach, but the acquired feel like, okay, we helped shape a little bit of this go forward company culture, and we're now in their DNA as opposed to having been absorbed by them.
Exactly, exactly. It makes such a huge difference. And even if you don't maybe select the alternative, the fact that it was considered and so thoughtful about which way are we going to go, it makes such a huge difference on the culture side of things for sure.
Well, interesting dichotomy, because on one hand, you're trying to platformize it such that you'll never need to use an add-ons approach in a particular area, but that doesn't mean we don't stay open-minded and pragmatic about the fact that we may not be able to build the perfect company, and it's very likely that some aspects of the add-on could actually be the appropriate way to adopt the go-forward approach.
Well, especially in the software world. I mean, how close-minded would it be not to consider new technology? And when
Mhm.
you have been spending years to build that kind of platform internally, there's going to have been new entrants into the game that you maybe have never considered, or you feel like you've already made your decisions. And so these earlier stage acquisitions can really open your eyes to perhaps new technology that is better overall for the company. And so just considering it, it would be silly, especially in the software world, not to do that. You'd miss out on some really great technology and upgrades yourself and modernization, quite frankly. So I do think there's some basics, not trying to plug any software, but of course, like NetSuite, Salesforce, there's all like the big behemoth basics, but there are so many other companies that have popped up in the software scene to make life easier and better for everyone involved. And just looking at everything that's available and making those decisions during the acquisition is critical.
Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, let's touch on one final topic, which is the cultural piece of these integrations. And so I have no doubt that the T word, transparency, is going to be front and center with how you message to this newly acquired add-on. Obviously, we're assuming that you've built a good culture at the platform company as well, and we don't want that to be deteriorated. However, if we're going to jam everybody in the add-on into our culture, that feels like it's going against the grain, no matter how much transparency we use. So how do you approach cultural integration? And is there any influence on the platform culture that is now a remnant in a good way of the add-on?
Absolutely. So once again, I'll go back to start in diligence and understand the culture and the values. At this point, you will already know about the customer set and the go-to-market synergies that are probably going to happen with the add-on. But now really focus on the people and to make sure are our basic company values aligned. If the basic company values aren't aligned, even if you have the best product fit ever, it could be a disastrous acquisition. And so have all those conversations up front, not only with maybe the values you have in your website, but day to day, how do you guys treat each other? How are you communicating? If you're fully remote, what is your online communication like? And understanding that. So then as you go into the post-acquisition phase and you start making those integration decisions, you can then address head on, maybe what are some of the things that are going to change from the company that you're adding on, or even yourself. Once again, as the acquirer, there just may be some fundamental things that we're going to change now that we have an acquisition, and explaining why. Why are we changing, and how does that still align with the overall company values and our ultimate goal to meet our P sponsors goals, or whatever it may be 5 years down the road. And once again, offering up that opportunity, we understand that these changes, this culture may not be a good fit for you any longer, because you may have joined an organization that had a different culture, a different behavior model, if you will. And we are okay with that. We acknowledge it, we accept it, and we quite frankly encourage everyone to raise their hand if they think that this is not going to be a good fit. And we'll talk about what that might mean. But being really upfront, really early about what is this new combined company's values, how are we going to behave, how are we not going to behave, all of that trickles into a new handbook, new communication styles. How are we going to do our all hands? If you do an international acquisition, maybe your all hands used to be in the morning, now they're going to be in the afternoon to accommodate more time zone differences. Things like that, just level setting it all so everyone understands exactly what to expect in kind of the new world order, if you will.
So if I'm hearing you right, after the acquisition, it's not as if everything is the same as it was and the platform just imposed its will on the add-on. We're looking at not just process, system, technology, and talent, but even cultural influences of the add-on that could make for a better combined platform, almost
100.
like an epoxy mixture of sorts.
Because the details matter, especially to people. So let's say you're acquiring a company that has a performance tracking system, and so do you. So great, we both have 2 performance tracking systems, but our ratings are completely different. The way we give out bonuses, raises, and promotions are very different. All those nuances matter. And so great, not only do we have to make sure we're using one system of record, so whether or not we're going to be using the acquiring company's performance management system or the one we have already, we're going to use one, and hey, everybody, let's level set on the structure. And maybe the new structure is a combination of the 2 structures, because maybe you saw something from the acquired company that you like better. Maybe you want to change your rating system. I'll give a really great example of something that we did at Active Prospect when we acquired our first company. We actually added a value to our company value that was from the company we were acquiring. And that really went a long way to show that, hey, we are combined and we are one company. And we actually felt like our values were lacking, and we needed to add one from your values that really reflect our new business, and adopted a lot of the vernacular that the company used to celebrate and kind of to refer to those values. And it was like we came out of day one post-acquisition with a new value set that was a combination of both. And that's huge. That trickles down to performance evaluations, promotions, and even the software and technologies that you select need to support that new combined culture and that new combined kind of people ops function, if you will. So it really trickles down to everything that you decide to do post-acquisition.
Yeah, love it. And I guess built into that is another challenge, which includes leading the historical employee population of the platform company to evolve as well. It's not just that we're going to help integrate these folks into our world, but they're going to shape who we are evolving into over a longer arc. And this is a bit of a step change in that front, but people are proud and they may not want to evolve, but that's your job as a leader to help make that happen.
Absolutely. And especially if there's a wide difference between the 2 companies coming together. A lot of the times, once again, you assume you're the bigger company, you're the big parent acquiring out there acquiring. That's not always the case. Smaller companies acquire bigger companies. And so there's fear on both sides. Oh my goodness, we're acquiring a much larger company. What's going to happen to my job? Are things going to change around here? Are we just going to get absorbed? and the company being acquired, even though they're bigger, they're thinking the same thing. So everyone's coming into an acquisition perhaps with the same fears. And so just being able to address them upfront and level set, which is why there's so much effort that needs to go in from the leadership team at every organization to get in front of this and back to having that dedicated person. That integration leader, person responsible for this, should be the one bringing all of leadership together to say, hey, we need to be aware of these situations and be making decisions along the way. That way, on day one, we are being transparent with everyone at this company with what they can expect as far as changes or no changes. And how is that going to happen with our integration roadmap? And what I've learned the hard way is when you don't have that person responsible for that, these types of things just fall by the wayside.
Well said. Jessica, we could go on for another couple of hours, but you've got some value to go create. So we'll wrap up on that note. And to our audience, there's a lot to unpack here. It might even be worth listening down a couple times. My takeaways: be curious, stand for something. In Jessica's case, transparency, curiosity, vulnerability. Be passionate about your craft and put your heart and soul in the line when you lead. So I'm fired up. Thank you for the energy. And if you're willing, maybe down the road, we can have you back for another conversation.
That'd be great. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.